to the Air Combat Simulation Podcast, brought to you by BVR Productions. Together with content creators, mission builders, experts, and enthusiasts, we explore the comprehensive world of combat aircraft simulation.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 23 of the Air Combat Sim podcast, where there's only three of us going to talk about the upcoming Apache, but we have Casmo with us, who is or is flying those in real life, so he is the expert when it comes to that module. And we have Goat and me, I'm Baltic Dragon. So hi guys.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Tricker says he's sorry he can't make it. He's in Cancun, and I told him he's being very selfish.
Yeah, he's being very selfish. He could have joined us from there, wherever it is.
No.
Where's Cancun?
In Mexico.
Ah, all right.
It's like it's a nice vacation spot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so with Tricker on vacation, so or
well, he's working.
Work.
Yeah, he's working.
Yeah,
That's what's even worse is he's there for work.
Yeah, some people.
And Jabbers is he's got some sick family members that he's tending to, so he's not going to be with us today.
No, but it's important that Casmo is with us because you're going to be the one talking most.
He has some
tonight.
Familiarity with the Apache, right?
Yeah,
I'm not
believe
sure
so.
what
You know something.
Yeah,
a little bit. I don't know if expert level, but I know enough. I guess enough to be dangerous.
So we're just joking that we're 2 weeks away from release, but we'll see when we release this episode if it's going to be out or not already. We'll see. But yeah, let's talk. I know, Casmo, you did quite a few videos when you responded to the videos done by Wags on what we can expect on how things work in the Apache. So what's your... Or maybe first of all, I think everyone knows you, but if they don't, if you could tell a few words about your experience with Apache, and then tell us about your experience with Apache in DCS so far.
Yeah, sure. So, I flew Apaches in the Army for a couple years. Most of my time flying Kaioas, AH-64Ds, but I did transition to the Apache once the Kaioa was removed from service. So say 400 or 500 hours. Did a short deployment in the Apache. I flew mostly Echo models. I did the Delta model, which is what ED is modeling. I flew that maybe 100 hours. I think most of my training at Fort Rucker, just getting qualified in the Apache, was in that one, and then a little bit at my first unit, and then we got Echoes, so transitioned to that and spent most of the time in there. So a little bit familiar. The Apache kind of goes through a lot of upgrades, a ton of upgrades, honestly, just constant software changes, and this button now does this type of stuff. So it's a little intimidating for me because I know a lot of people kind of watch my videos and are like, oh, he's gonna be able to square me away on the Apache. Like, man, I don't remember a lot of this stuff, so I'm kind of going through the manual myself, and trying to remind myself how certain things work. And it's kind of, there's just enough differences in some ways that it can be very confusing. So, but yeah, it's a great machine. It's totally awesome that ED's doing it, especially given how they're basically having to do it from a manual, just like read a manual and try to replicate what's in the manual, because those manuals are not, I don't want to say they're hard to read, but it's hard to just, you don't just go to school and they hand you the manual, and be like, here, read this, and then we're going to go fly. Like, there's a lot of classes and sort of nuance explaining what's going on behind the scenes. Manuals don't really do that. They just say this button does this. Okay, well, why? And what happens because of that is what's kind of missing. So it's tough.
Yeah, I imagine that the fidelity that they're deriving from manuals. I mean, but are they working, or do we know if they're working with other Apache pilots in terms of deriving flight model characteristics and some of the other pieces?
So, all right, I will say this: yes, they are, and I am on that team. I mean that. So I've shied away from saying that for months because I didn't want a lot of craziness to come with that, or a lot of assumptions. But I've been with the team since, I want to say, like June. They have several guys much smarter than me, guys who are still flying them or have a ton more time, who are absolutely helping kind of read through the nuance and say, okay, this is what really is happening. Because a lot of times too, there were differences in what the manual says to what is happening in real life. So I'm trying to think of, for instance, like the gun. The book says the gun shoots at a certain rate of fire, but in actuality, at the unit level, they would sort of dial that back a little bit for like barrel life and life of equipment within the gun itself. And so the rate of fire, when they plug it in at, I think it's 625 plus or minus 25 rounds per minute, we're all watching it and we're like, that's too fast. That just doesn't seem right. And then it's this kind of challenge between, well, the book says this, but in actuality, it's really this, but we don't have any proof of that. It's just, it's tribal lore. So things like that are happening. But yeah, they've got some really smart dudes working on it. I'm there for eye candy. It's kind of what I told Wags. But there's more to it than just making the Apache right, because there's culture and the tactics and the terminology. There's a lot of different things that come with this that is unique, or certainly just different than what it already kind of exists in the the DCS community, because obviously a lot of it is circles around jets and all that crap. And then you've got we've got this smattering of helicopters, but they're sort of disjointed. They're not linked. I mean, you got the Mi-8 and the Hind, and they're probably the closest of a subculture community within the helicopter world. K-50 just kind of out there in its space. The Gazelle. So there's a whole new vernacular that's coming with it, and I think that I add a little bit to that, because that was kind of my tactics and operations were really where I did a lot of stuff in the military. So it's easier for me to kind of explain when they're trying to make like the scenarios that are going to come with the campaign. It's like, okay, this is the kind of words you would use, and this is the kind of situation that you would find yourself in with this. So but yeah, they do certainly have some smart dudes helping read between the lines and figure out what all that stuff means. And the flight model is definitely one of them, because that's one of those things. Obviously, a manual's not going to tell you how it feels.
Right.
And so they've got those guys working on that. So.
Well, and I know there are a number of folks who are chomping at the bit for this to come out, and I think that Eagle Dynamics is doing a great job, certainly teasing us with a lot of the videos, and certainly appreciate your comments. But a friend of mine recently said something effective that goes, people don't really understand how different flying helicopters is in DCS rather than just flying the pointy-nosed aircraft.
Yeah, it is different, and that's something that I've been preaching since I started my channel. Is it's a very different feel, and feeling is very much a part of flying helicopters. I think more so than flying fixed wing. I'm flying, like we were just talking about before we started. I'm flying a Cessna every day for the past 2 months. I don't feel as much of what the aircraft is doing as I do in a helicopter. It's just kind of part and parcel of being a helicopter pilot. So it's hard to replicate that. And there are some certain things, in DCS. I really like the K-50 and I like the Hind because they feel weighty. They have some momentum to them. I've routinely kind of criticized the Huey and say it just feels very light to me. So those are things that I look for when I'm kind of playing with the FM. Is like, does this feel as close as you can to flying a helicopter without having your butt thrown all around underneath you?
So how is it? What are you using for your controls at this point? Do you have collective and cyclic, or how do you have? Are you just using reorienting what the existing tools, or for the most part?
Yeah, I have a VKB gunfighter with the I think it's 20 centimeter extension, and then I just built like this base out of scrap wood so that it's elevated up, so it's basically like a cyclic. I've got VKB pedals, and I've got an old ass Thrustmaster T16 million throttle. I do have a collective that I would love to talk more about, but I can't because the guy. So basically, a guy is working on a collective, and he made a prototype and sent it to me to test it. And I think he was having trouble getting parts. So I just haven't like showcased it at all. Like I told him, hey, I'll do a video on it once you're ready. So I'm just kind of waiting on him. But so I do have a collective, but right now I'm kind of away from home. So I'm just using this throttle. And I actually just ordered a Mongoose throttle from Verbal. Should be here next week, I think. But yeah. So I don't believe you need a collective. I think pedals though. You definitely gotta have pedals if you want to fly helicopters in DCS.
Got it. Yeah, because it seemed to me that certainly it's a different game, and that was what my friend was talking about, Bobby, and he was going on about he couldn't wait to get it. He does most of his stuff in VR. How about you? Do you use VR, or are you pretty much still on the screen?
I just bought VR. I got it like last week. I got the Reverb G2.
G2.
The problem is when you're a content creator, VR is a challenge. You'll notice that most of the big names, of which I do not consider myself one of, but most of the big names don't really do VR stuff, or when they do, it's kind of short-lived or just kind of a niche type thing. Because it's just so challenging and taxing on the system, and then you're trying to record, and I don't even know how you stream in VR. Like I know some people do that. I don't like, how do you read the comments? Like I don't know how you do it. For me, VR, that's the challenge for me, is because a lot of the times if I'm playing, I'm creating content, so I don't have an opportunity to just play with it. I do every now and then spool it up, but then I'm still in that mode where I'm not used to it, and it kind of makes me feel a little icky, so I can't do it for long. It's like I can play an hour of IL-2, which I think looks better in VR just because it's a little bit less taxing. But after an hour I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go lay in bed for an hour, and recover. But I think the Apache is gonna look cool in VR, just because in the real cockpit, especially in the front seat, like there's stuff like poking out at you and stuff. So I think it's gonna be pretty cool.
By no means I'm a good helicopter pilot in DCS, to the contrary, but I found that just flying it VR makes so much. It's a huge difference. Yeah. Also, I think the things like the helmet-mounted queuing system in VR, where you really have it on one eye, that's also a game changer. And also to what Rob said before, sometimes people come to my place and I show them what I do, so I put them in VR set that they never actually used it, and I let them fly an F-16 or F-15 or whatever, and they, it's fun, it's easy, and then I put them in the helicopter or the Gazelle or something and tell them to take off, and it's fun to watch them.
Yeah, my gunnery, in like dogfighting with old warbirds is 10 times better in VR. That's fantastic. But yeah, you're right. The plan, I think, with the Apache is to, it is going to put the HDU in one eye, and I think it is going to be changeable. I think they've said that it's going to, you can swap it over. In real life, you can't. It's 100% a right eye thing. There's no mechanism at all to put it in the left eye. But yeah.
And you mentioned earlier something about some words used in a campaign. So there's going to be a campaign with the Apache, something about it? Or it's just in general?
Not a campaign. I think, how they try to ship some just some single player missions. Yeah. So there's I think some plan for that as well. Just some training and little scenarios, but I'm not aware of any campaign.
Well, there's one we can probably speak about openly.
I was curious. Well, you may not be. Do you have any campaigns that you've been thinking about?
You talking to PD?
Talking to Casmo a few days back. So I know he has an idea of a campaign, and we decided that at some point next year, when the Apache is out and it's kind of a bit polished, we'll work on one together.
Yeah.
Cool. So
he's got the know-how.
Good fun. Yeah, but that's still. Let's wait for the Apache to be out at all. Then I have to learn to fly it. And again, I'm counting Casmo here. In multi-crew or something. And then we'll see. But that's still a lot of things before that happens have to happen or be finished. So that's for next year, I guess.
Yeah, you got a full play, buddy.
Oh yeah. But I'm looking into ways of kind of managing a little bit more of doing DCS against my normal work, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so far so good. Hope to move forward with the current plans more quicker right now. But coming back to Apache, just to put things in perspective. So you said we're gonna get the Delta model, the D model. You flew the Echoes. What's in use today in the Army, and what's the difference between what we get in DCS and what we have now? If you can speak about it.
Sure. I mean, the Echo is the more modern, the current one, and then there's different versions of it. So I think version 6 of the software just came out. So I think it's got like color screens instead of just the green ones that I grew up with. That's the thing about aviation. Everything used to be harder, So you look at all the updates, you're like, oh, it was hard when I had to do it. But they have all kinds of new fancy stuff. But there's still Deltas in service. But the Echoes are slowly kind of phasing those out. Fundamentally, the difference is beefier transmission. I mean, the Echo just goes fast. I mean, the first couple times I flew it, like it was hard to land because it just didn't want to slow down. You just felt like you were fighting it to slow down. I just wanted to go. It's got a lot more situational awareness with Link 16, which is kind of like if you think about the A-10 and the F-16 and stuff, how you can look around in your helmet sight and you can see other aircraft, little circle around them and stuff. Things like that is Link 16. It's just situational awareness type stuff. And then some other just kind of doohickeys in there. The Delta has gone through many upgrades over its time. But yeah, that's the one that you're going to be getting. I think 2008-ish kind of version of the aircraft.
Why did they pick that version of it?
Because that's what they have access to.
Okay, so everything else, just to clarify, other pieces would be classified, but there's enough information around this version of the 2008 Delta that they can get it and bring it and build it.
Yeah, essentially, as I understand it, it's because you can find the actual, what we call a Dash 10, which is the operator's manual. You can find the Dash 10 online, open source. That's what they've used. So you can't get an Echo model Dash 10 or things like that. Same kind of reason that they can't make an F-22 and F-35. Like there's just no open source data to it. So it's kind of the same thing. So that's the driving force of why you get that one.
All right, and having flown the real thing, having flown the one in DCS, or it's going to come out, if you compare the complexity of learning it to other aircraft, let's say Hind or A-10, where would you put the Apache in terms of learning curve?
Yeah, I would never compare the learning curve to any other helicopter in DCS because there's nothing else that even remotely comes close. I was joking in my Discord that the K-50 is going to become the Fisher-Price, my first combat helicopter. Like and there's some complexity to that thing, but the Apache is really more akin to, learning the F-18 or the F-16 or something. It's just, you've got what we call MPDs, but MFDs full of pages upon pages. You're setting up stuff, so if you're a steam gauge kind of guy, then this is probably not the aircraft for you. But if you do like pages and lots of button pushes, then this is the aircraft for you. I think especially once the FCR, the fire control radar portion comes out, which is supposed to not come out with the initial release, that's going to add some uniqueness to the multi-crew and multi-aircraft dynamic. That's one of those things too. And I've talked to, real F-18 pilots and F-16 pilots who, have had to use those ground radars, and they don't work very good in real life either. Neither does the FCR. So it's probably going to work better in DCS than it does in real life. Just because it's hard to program things like that to have problems. I assume. I mean, I'm not a computer guy, but it's hard to make something confuse trees with tanks and things like that. But I think that's going to add some pretty cool complexity to it. You can kind of see why it's such a powerful machine in real life. I think it's going to be great too, just because, I'm a huge advocate of helicopters, right? I mean, that's why I started my podcast and really why I started my channel, because it was just like, great, more fighter stuff. Okay, let's talk about some helicopters. and I sometimes internally grumble at the helicopters in DCS because I'm like, these don't really tell the story. Like you're not kicking ass with most of these helicopters. Like if you're good with the K-50, you can do some damage, but the rest kind of falls short, and it kind of gives people the wrong impression of what helicopters can do. Well, you put the Apache out there, it's going to be able to do some serious work, and I'm excited to see people do that. And it's going to be awesome too because it's got a laser designator, and the ability to work with your fixed wing buddies is going to be cool. And we don't really have that right now with helicopters. Like I think there was somebody made like a script where the Gazelle could do it, but it's not like stock. It's not something that's in the game actually. And so being able to do stuff like that is going to add some complexity to the multiplayer game as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
If for those folks that want to get up to speed, what would you recommend that they do to get ready for this, if anything?
Oh, watch Firebirds constantly.
Is that it? Is that the answer?
What else can you do?
And Casmo's channel.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, watch my channel.
Follow it.
Watch multiple episodes. No, I don't know, man. It's hard because I think sometimes the community probably leans. You want to lean forward in the saddle, but you don't want to lean so far forward you fall off the horse. So I think sometimes people try to overthink these things and say, well, I need to get it all ready to go. Wags puts out great videos. On the SME team, when we were all kind of building up to the IHADS video, Wags is kind of doing his thing and he's chatting with us stuff. But, in the last questions and everybody will kind of chime in and stuff. And I think all of us SMEs were like, oh my God, this is going to be a beast. Like, how is he going to, break all this down? And Wags even said something. He's like, no, it'll be good. It'll be like 10 minutes. And, in the back of our heads, we're like, no, there's no way. I mean, his video was like 11 minutes long. And I told him, I was like, you did a better job than most instructors do in like 3 days. Like it was really succinct and really good. I don't know that anyone can really, quote unquote, do anything, except I guess look at that manual, which again is open source. Just search for Apache, operator's manual or training manual or something. And you can look in there, but I mean, it's like 1,200 pages or something. So it you gotta kind of know what you're looking for. At the end of the day, it's flying a helicopter,
Yeah.
Just,
I mean, but if you're
focus on that.
If you're proficient, if someone says, "Man, I'm the best in the Hind," will that translate into the Apache, or is it just
no? Because I think the Hind, I love the Hind, but I wish it was not that Hind. I wish it was a more modern Hind, which I get. Again, they don't have access. They don't have access, but there's really not a whole lot that translates in my mind. Like I'm just kind of thinking off the cuff here. I mean, basically, sure, it's the same, but there's so much more technology. I would say technology, more modern technology in the Apache than the Hind, which is basically just point generally towards the enemy, look through your little scope, and shoot a missile. There's going to be a little bit more involved, especially again when it comes to laser codes and different types of rockets and things like that. But I think if you can, I think the IHADS, again, watch that video. And I think I said it in my video, like watch Wags' video like a couple times, because that IHADS, there's a ton of information there, but it is different. So if you've only flown the A-10 and the F-18 and you're used to that helmet sight, it is different and it's giving you some different information. And, and there's certain things that I wish it did, like the F-18 and stuff. But it does things the way it does for a purpose. So maybe just kind of take a look at it and try to just wrap your head around all those different symbols and what they mean. And like I said in my video, just once you do get it, don't become a slave to the IHADS. Like use it to help you, but at the end of the day, fly the helicopter.
And and that briefly, you also mentioned those things about this looking with one eye to one direction, one eye in the other direction. I think I asked you a long time ago if it's true. Is it definitely not?
No, 100% not true. If somebody's doing that, they've got some other things going on in their life, but it's not because of the Apache.
It's just, Ed Macy had that in his book, so that's why I got inspired. Saying, wow, that's cool. But anyway, so you said this fire control radar. how it's called. It's coming later on. Can you, if you can, tell us what you know, what will be an initial release, or if it's easier to say what won't be an initial release, and what we'll get later on, unless it's at this point classified?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm trying to, like, I don't want to reveal anything that's not been publicly. Like, I checked with Wags yesterday. I was like, okay, what do you want me to talk about? What can I talk about? I think what's been publicly told is that, yes, it's coming with a version of the Hellfire and some rockets. I think they plan to expand potentially the types of rockets. I'm not sure. And then, like I said, the fire control radar will come along later. I don't have any idea what that timeline is, or honestly what the challenge is. But there's some people that seem to think that that's what makes it a Delta, and they're confused. Like, the fire control radar is its own thing. They're all Delta models. It's just some have a fire control radar. We put them on and take them off as required. So typically, you would only have in the U.S. Army, you'd only have like 2. Per company of aircraft, which is like 8 aircraft, because that's the point. Everyone doesn't need one. Now, for the foreign sales, when we sell them to other countries, I think they typically come with one per aircraft. So that's why you'll always see, I don't know, Taiwanese or something have a FCR, but that kind of defeats the purpose, because you should be able to just use one to work with. I think it'll share up to 8 aircraft, but typically like 4, So yeah. I don't know if you wanted me to expand more on the FCR.
Oh, if it's coming later, maybe we can skip it for now, I guess. But my other question is, will we have some kind of AI like the Petrovich, which we have for Heinz? Would we have kind of a Freeman or whatever name could be for the Apache?
Yeah, I guess they're coming out with, I think they said it was George. I don't know the name. I feel like it's changed once or twice, because I feel like I heard a different name earlier on in the process, and now it's George. So I don't know. I don't know much about the AI. I mean, yes, it's coming with one. It's going to have to. I mean, you can't fly this aircraft single pilot. Like, you've got to have something, either another player or an AI to do certain things. You just have to. I don't know anything about it. I don't know that it's been anything that I've played with. But I'm interested to see how it's going to play out, because it's going to have to be a little bit more involved than the old Russian Peter, who basically doesn't have much to do. The front seater in the Hind he's not task saturated. Like, he ain't got a whole lot going on. He's basically sitting there waiting for you to want to shoot the missile. But other than that, there's not a whole lot going on except flip a couple switches for you. The front seater in the Apache, he's working. Like, he's got a lot of stuff to do, and the guy in the back seat's got a lot of stuff to do. So it's a very busy cockpit.
Yes, we'll need to see how it works out. I mean, that's a difficult topic, I guess. That's the same for F-14, and the Jester helps a lot, but it's difficult to nail it to the proper extent. And I guess with the helicopter, it's even more difficult. In a way. Well, we'll see. That's interesting to see how it develops. I wanted to ask one more thing, but it just slipped my mind. Rob, you have anything right now?
Not off the top of my head. Other than I was just curious, tangentially. So when you were moving from a training standpoint, how long did it take you to transition from the Kaioa to the Apache?
It was about a 5-month course. The aircraft qualification course, yeah. It's long. Now, it's probably longer than it should have been. But that is, it goes in phases. So you learn how to just fly, and then we went into nights, and then you go into Penvis. So actually using the night vision equipment, and then gunnery. I feel like I'm probably missing something in there, but it's just all these phases, and some of them are probably a little bit longer than others, especially if you've already got a couple thousand hours and you're like, okay, I know how to fly a helicopter. Like, I got it. This one's just bigger, but it kind of flies the same. And then, of course, when you get into the night vision system, that's when it gets funky. because you have to do the bag, which I'm hoping ED will do something with the bag, because I think that would be interesting for people. Which if you've ever watched Firebirds, you know what the bag is.
For those that are listening that haven't watched Firebirds, what is the bag?
So first, we'll just say that flying helicopters in the military at night, you typically use night vision goggles. In the Apache, they have what is called the PNVS, so the pilot's night vision sensor, which is on the nose. So if you ever look at the nose of the Apache, you'll see this big kind of bucket thing with two lenses. That's the TADS, which is the Target Acquisition Designation System or site. I guess it depends on who you ask. And then right above it, there's a little turret with a kind of roundish lens, and that is the PNVS, so the pilot's night vision sensor. That is then tied to your head through the IHAD system. So in the Delta model, it was kind of like Track IR. You had these little emitters. I can't remember if the emitters were on the helmet or the sensors. One of the two. But your helmet was then being, the cockpit knew where your helmet was, and so you would get in the aircraft, you'd bore sight it. There's a little tube on front of your in front of your seat up on the dashboard, and you basically just line up your helmet display with that tube, hit a button, and you bore sight. So now the aircraft knows, okay, this is him looking straight ahead. So now when you activate the PNVS, it's turning with your head. So you turn left, it turns left, and it moves at 120 degrees per second. So it keeps up with your head. You'd have to whip your head left or right for it to not keep up. So the FLIR is in the PNVS has a FLIR, forward-looking infrared, and then that is projected to your right eye through the HDU, which if you've seen any of the videos now that WAGS has put out, you've seen what that looks like. So that's presented to your right eye, and that is how you typically fly at night in the Apache. You can use night vision goggles, but you can't use night vision goggles and the FLIR, so you got to kind of choose one or the other. And Apache guys typically use the FLIR. So the bag is a way to train you to use your right eye as a primary, sensor for your brain. So as you can imagine, in the cockpit, there's a lot of lights, right? So there's a lot of things that are lit up. Outside, if you're flying at night, you've got, buildings, you've got other airplanes, you got stars, you got all kinds of stuff. There's all this competition going on between your left eye and your right eye, because your right eye is trying to look at the screen, but it can also sort of see through it. Your left eye is seeing all these weird lights and stuff, and it's gonna drag your attention away from one or the other. So in order to try to train your brain to not have this called ocular rivalry, is they do what's called the bag. So the bag phase, I think it was about a week or so, and you go out to the aircraft and you get in the back seat. They have completely covered every window with like this canvas type stuff from the inside. It's kind of like Velcro's in. So they cover all these windows up, and they even put tape in there. And they're like, look, if there's any holes in the canvas, if you see any light whatsoever, cover it up with tape, because it will screw you up when you're first starting out. And so it's a day flight, but to you it's nighttime, because all you can see is through the FLIR, which looks the same day or night. The front seater is your instructor pilot, and he doesn't have a bag on, so he can see everything just fine. And you taxi out and you take off and you try to fly basically just using your right eyeball, which is now basically 10 feet in front of you and 3 feet below you. And it's a funky feeling. The first time you do it, it's really weird, and you're competing with the sensation of your body movement, and you're trying to pay attention to the symbology. You're trying to look through the FLIR. It's just really crazy. And you do have all these cockpit lights, which they tell you turning down the cockpit lights as much as you can so you can still see it, but that it's not glaring. And you just try to struggle through. So the bag, it's the great equalizer, where boys become men. Kind of joke about. The first day I did it, I flew for like an hour and a half, and I felt disgusting. And I went home to my hotel, and I just sat in a chair and stared at the ceiling. It's kind of like me playing VR now. I just felt gross. The next day, I stopped and bought a pizza and smashed it on the way home. Like, just for people, it takes different times. Like I think Brad, who was in my last video, we were talking about the iHads. I think he said it took him like a week of going through the bag before he felt normal. And some people just never get over it. The bag is terrible, but that's the bag.
And so some folks said if they don't get over it, that disqualifies them, or they go on to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anyone ever fails it. I mean, I guess at worst case is that you're just having a really hard time and maybe they recycle you to a class behind it. But I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody who just flat out just couldn't do it, you know. I'm sure they exist. I just don't know them. I've never heard of them. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not hard. It's just different, and it just takes a little bit of time. And you kind of cheat the system too. You know, I would still do it even as a more experienced guy as a pilot in command. I'd close my left eye. You know, if things got weird and I was really trying to focus on what I was doing, I'd just close my left eye and just focus on my right. But I think that's where that whole I can read 2 books at the same time nonsense came from. Because you're not looking at 2 different things. It's basically you have trained your brain a little bit better, and I just say a little bit better than everyone else, because everyone can do this, is changing your focus. So if you were to take, I don't know, if you got something nearby you, like a book or something, grab it and hold it in front of your right eye, of, you know, I don't know, 6 inches, 8 inches in front of your eye. Focus on that, and then change your focus to something far away. That's all you're doing. So you're flying along, you're focused on your right eye. Your left eye is just kind of glazed over, you know, it's just not paying attention to anything. And you're focusing on what the screen is telling you. Well, now I want to look inside because I want to make sure I'm on the right frequency. Well, I'm just going to change my focus, and now I'm going to pay attention to what my left eye can see, and I'm going to move my eyes in conjunction, because that's how human eyes work. My human eyes are going to move in coincidence to look at the Casmo page, but I'm only going to pay attention to what my left eye sees. And my right eye is going to be glazed over, and it's just going to see green because I've got the HDU information there. So it's not this I'm looking over here, but I'm also looking over there nonsense.
Well, yeah. As I said, that was in the... It wasn't the British pilots. Maybe they have different training. I don't know. But, Rob, thank you. You brought back my my question, and that was you flew and helped tested the Apache and also the Kaioa in real life and in DCS. And how do you see in DCS the way of working together for both aircraft, especially in multiplayer, of course? You
Sure.
think there's going to be a lot of synergy there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those two, you know, in the heyday of, you know, facing off against Mother Russia, you know, and all this sort of Cold War gone hot type stuff. I mean, that was peas and carrots right there, the Kaioa and the Apache. You know, the Kaioa was built originally to support the artillery. I mean, the artillery branch is the one that really funded the Kaioa to be built as far as an observation platform with the mass-mounted sight. And then it was some shenanigans going on in the Persian Gulf, which then required we needed a light armed aircraft to operate off of these ships and docking stations in the Persian Gulf, and that's how you got the armed Kaioa. But once that all sort of developed, then yeah, you had this great energy or synergy of a reconnaissance helicopter that could be. It was very quiet. I mean, a Kaioa, we could get within a kilometer of people and they wouldn't know you were there. They couldn't hear you. Probably even closer depending on the terrain and stuff, but that could sneak forward, use its mass-mounted sight, which is not a great sight. Like the thermal imaging system in the MMS was not awesome, but when you're fighting hundreds of tanks, you don't need it to be awesome. Like, you just need it to spot, like, oh, there's a bunch of hot spots out there at 8 kilometers, and then pass that information on to the artillery, but also pass it on to the Apaches. And then again, once you've got the Apaches that have, especially modern Apaches that have much better sensors that can see really far out. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of good synergy when those two come together. And it's going to force people to have to cooperate. Like, I don't think you're going to have fun flying single player with some of these aircraft. Like, I don't think you're going to have fun the way you could have fun as if you joined up with a couple other dudes and did multi-crew and did multi-ship operations. So it's going to be fun. Again, I go back to, I love laser ops. I like what that offers. where now you can have a Kaioa go out and laze targets for the A-10s and for the Apaches and all that good stuff. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Another question, because talking about sensors and that Apache has so much better sensors being able to spot in longer distances, will that work that way in DCS? So if we can talk about that. So is it the normal TGP technology which you have used and A10, etc., or is it something extra developed for the Apache in that department?
No, I mean, it should be, I mean, obviously it looks different than a TGP, but it's functionally the same. And I can't really get into ranges because even if I could, I don't necessarily remember what's a good range. But you're going to be able to see pretty far out. Obviously, the challenge with helicopters is you're so much lower to the ground, so you don't need to be able to zoom quite the same way as an F-16 does because he's at 20,000 feet. But you're also going to be a lot closer to the action already, so you don't need quite the zoom factor. I think the real cool thing that people should be excited about across the board is the amount of work that ED's been putting into the FLIR. And I know they've released pictures of that, and I've seen a couple other pictures. I mean, that crap looks awesome. They've really done a lot of good work on making that stuff not look cartoonish. Because before it was a little cartoonish, and I understand why. I mean, it's not easy to replicate, but now there's a lot more gradient and variation in the image, and I think that's gonna. And it's supposed to be for everything, right? It's not just Apache, but Apache is, I guess, driven them to address this more, or just make it a little bit sexier. But it looks really good.
Well, it's good to hear that we'll get improvements all across the board, but I think that's how it always works. So we have some new tech developed for a specific model, and then it goes back to all the others. Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to that. Sorry. And coming back to Kaioa, I don't know if you're still involved, or is anything any news, because it's been quiet recently on how the development's going.
No, I don't have anything to share. I know they had some medical challenges. I think I think they pushed that out publicly. But as far as a status or a timeline, I have no idea.
We'll be trying to get Sven here on the podcast at some point. We spoke already. I think it'll happen at some point in the future. All right. I think it's a bit shorter than usual. But again, the topic. Well, we have the aircraft that's not out yet. So thank you for sharing all you can, or you could, or from your testing. Rob, anything else?
No, for me, thanks a bunch. This has been really insightful, and I'm more excited about it than I was when we started talking. So it's really cool.
Yeah, and I'll just say, again, I don't put it out there like I'm on a team, like I'm flexing. I wanted to say that so that people understood that there are some really smart dudes working on it, and I'm not one of them. Like I don't put myself in the box that those dudes are, because they're really very knowledgeable. I call them nerds all the time, but they're very knowledgeable about the systems and like nuance. Like they're just like, oh no, this should look a little bit less like this, and just so. But I wanted to say that I was on a team so that people could understand. What is going on behind the scenes is quality work, right? It's not just, they're not just throwing stuff together. And I get tired of people using the F-16 as an example of, I hope it doesn't come out bad like the F-16. It's like, how many releases have we had since then, right? There's been at least 2 or 3, and they were quality, right? I mean, the Mosquito was good. Yeah, there was a few things that needed to be fixed. Show me software that isn't, right? I mean, there's always something that when it comes out, it didn't work 100%. The Hind came out much better place than I expected. And I think that the Apache is going to be in the same boat, just based on what I've observed, and just the way that they're addressing it. And I mean, it's insane to me because I'm a pretty easygoing guy and pretty easily satisfied with things. Like they will show things and I'm like, oh, that looks good. And then a week later, they're like, oh, we think this actually doesn't look right, and it'll just be this very nuanced, very minor change that I'm just like, I would have fine with it before, So they're really going through these painstaking measures to make it look really good. And like I said, we'll finish something and we're like, okay, well, that's done. And then a month later, they'll find a video and be like, oh, this video, it looks like it's a little bit different here, and it just sparks a whole new conversation. So they're really trying to get it right. And I hope that people can take that for what it's worth and, accept, it's going to have flaws. I guarantee it 100%. But it is not from a lack of caring, right? And I guess that's why I can put it. There's a lot of love and a lot of attention going into this one, because I think for a lot of us who've been playing flight simulators for a really long time, Jane's Longbow is a gold standard, right? You've got that, and you've got the Falcon 4.0 crowd and stuff. But there's certain aircraft that have a legacy in the simulation world, and the Apache's one of them. And of course, Wags himself, has background with that stuff. So there's nothing willy-nilly about this one. They're really putting the effort in there. And I think they were already working on it for like 2 years before they even announced it. So there's a lot of work and a lot of love going into it. So I think people should be excited about it. And they should definitely watch my channel.
Yeah, they definitely watch Casmo's channel.
If you haven't, you definitely need to look at it.
No, but there's a reason why they call it a study sim, and there's lots of naysayers or rivet counters, that always will look at all the details. But I have to say, working with Raspberry, I'm writing the manual for the Harrier, and it's a super complicated aircraft. It's like really, maybe 500 pages into it, which I released, and it's still maybe halfway through. And exactly, when you have the SMEs working with them, coming back to the things that were already done, you have to change them. And I guess it's the same, but it just shows how, and I think Apache is much more complicated than Harrier is when it comes to the systems. You said hundreds of those pages, all that stuff that needs to be modeled. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes SMEs kind of rain on aficionados parade, because I think people look at military aircraft and they expect that it is, everything is exactly where it's meant to be and everything's perfect and this is what it's supposed to do. And we routinely are telling people like, well, no, actually we hate that. What was it the other day? Somebody in the Discord was like, they spend the painstaking amount of effort to make sure that the controls are just right so that pilots have what they need where they need it. And I made a comment like, I wish that was true, but these things are developed by engineers who think that that's what pilots want, as opposed to asking pilots a lot of times. And so sometimes that just gets played out in games. And I've already seen people comment about the Apache, like the AH-64D. Like, I don't understand why it does that. Well, surprise. Sometimes we don't either, it's just the way that it is. And you can kind of complain about it, but at the end of the day, that's what it does. And you either learn how to do it or don't. And if you think it's stupid, well, literally thousands upon thousands of people have flown Apaches and they figured it out. So maybe the problem's not them, it's you. Just change your headspace and accept it for what it is and learn how to use it, or go fly the Hind. That's fine too.
It's always fascinating to me. I mean, and it's easy for people, certainly online, to make comments not to people's faces. But at the end of the day, software is hard. But my goodness, the authenticity that we're seeing today in these sims is amazing. And
it's out of control.
It's just insane. So, and I think that's the other piece of it. A lot of the people, when we talk about study sims, the goal is authenticity, because most of these people who are playing this never had the chance to get out there and do it in real life. And this is one way to satisfy that craving or experience it the best that they can. And hats off to Eagle Dynamics for bringing this to the crowd, because it's amazing.
I sometimes have to remind myself that it's for people who they get to scratch that itch that they otherwise never would be able to. But it's sometimes frustrating for guys like me, because we have our own little chats on the side, and we kind of watch from afar of different conversations, and sometimes it's so frustrating because people get into the tiniest detail that even we didn't think about, They're like, well, then this didn't happen. And we're like, well, I mean, I guess we never thought about it, it's not a big deal. And so sometimes that's frustrating when people ask us these really minute questions that we just would have never thought about or cared about, and I don't know how to answer it, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting because I think that, and I hear the same thing with Jello. It's like, oh, I forgot, or
Right.
I remember it was a long time
Yeah.
ago, you know. And if you're not, you know, you're not using it, you're losing it. But at the end of the day, someone who's read these 15, you know, detailed tech specs, tech manuals, who knows what they've got in their noggin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I haven't touched an Apache in real life in like 3 years, and I'll never touch one again. So guess what? I have forgotten 99% of how to fly it, you know, because I don't need to know it. You know, there's only so many penguins I can put on the iceberg, and I don't need those there anymore, you know. So.
Yeah, no, but like you said, and I think, but one of the things that you mentioned, and I thought was which is also pretty interesting to me, is that as you're articulating that it's bringing a new culture in with the helicopters, with the Apache to the sim, which is really fantastic because I don't really, you know, I hadn't really thought about that before. But you know, whether it's terminology, you know, the entire community is getting enhanced in a specific new way, and that's pretty doggone cool.
Well, there's just going to be a lot more utility, I think, with helicopters, because again, I struggle to find good scenarios where, you know, we talk about synergy, where there's a good synergy between. Oh, that car was loud. Where there's good synergy between jets and helicopters and DCS right now, because it's very challenging to coordinate between the two. Again, the K-50 is probably the only real, you know, butt kicker in a high intensity fight in DCS, but it's very hard to coordinate with jets because other than just looking out the window, I mean, how else do you share information? And so now with the Apache again is the ability to do that with the laser and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's going to add just a lot more utility for helicopters in the DCS world environment. I will say this though, this kind of goes back to my frustration, and I want to say this so that people can maybe kind of change their view on things, because it happens with the jets too. People will play different modules and they'll come to this conclusion that, well, this sucks, this plane sucks, or this helicopter sucks. You have to understand that not every piece of equipment is made for every situation. And so, for instance, if you're flying the Huey around and there's SAMs everywhere, then yes, you're probably going to get shot down a lot, because that's not what the Huey was designed to operate in, right? And so I worry too that sometimes people are going to take the Apache and put it into scenarios that it's just not really designed for, and then be pissed off because they're getting blown up, or you know, they're crashing or whatever. So they're, from a culture standpoint, just from military aviation and combat simulation and stuff, it's not just plugging in a module and just going flying around, but it's what is the scenario, and does my module lend itself to the scenario that I want to do? You know, when we go to flight school, everyone says don't pick the aircraft, pick the mission. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, what is it that you want to do? And then pick the right equipment for the job. You know, obviously sometimes you're forced to use equipment in the wrong situation, right? So when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, those weren't really good fights for the Kaioa and the Apache, but we made do, and we changed the way that we did things in order to meet the environment. But it took years to figure that out, you know, and it took, unfortunately, a lot of lives too to kind of figure out, like, okay, well, we can't do it this way. You know, guys were hovering in Afghanistan. It's like, you will never find anybody hover in Afghanistan or Iraq anymore. But that's how they started out, because that's how they were used to fighting, you know, preparing for the big one in Europe. Mm-hmm. So just understanding that, and I joke with the other Apache SMEs that, you know, once the Apache comes out, everyone's going to be stealing each other's Hellfires, because nobody's going to change their laser code. You know, so everyone's going to be shooting Hellfires, and they're going to be wondering why they missed, you know. Or when FCR comes out, they're just going to turn it on and leave it on, and then wonder why the jets keep shooting them down. You know, so there's these little things that they don't know the right way. You know, because again, the manual just says turn this on with this button, but it doesn't say, hey, turn this on, but only when you need to. You know, it's not a tactics manual; it's an operator's manual. So people just be patient and understand the scenario that you're in. And if you were the one creating the scenario, well, then really think through the system and what it's designed for and make your scenario fit that. So.
Well, that's the beauty of DCS. Some people will just go ahead and shoot, set the ammo to unlimited and shoot hundreds of Hellfires. Others who want to go, really meticulously with step-by-step what's done in real life. I've seen it with Raven 1, which is a pretty, let's say, advanced campaign when it comes to keeping things real. There are people who really didn't like it because they said, hey, come on, I'm going to shoot the first live missile at mission 8 or 9. It's boring. But
that's right. Combat is boring. I mean, that's what people need to understand. Like 99% of it is boring, and then there's that 1% where you're like, oh my god.
Exactly.
No, I think it's a really interesting point. When we talk about, and I'll be on the sidelines listening to, Baltic talk with Kevin Miller and Jello, and it's, going through or talking about these pieces. At the end of the day, it's about trying to bring the most authentic piece to it. But the other side of it is, and I think this goes to your point, Casmo, is that there's a thing about tactics. You have the tools, but then there's the tactics.
Yeah.
And Paco Chirichi said at one point, he was watching an online event, and he just was like, he commented, he goes, it's like Braveheart, where all the planes just fly at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're running down the hill. And there's not doing any tactics. So, it doesn't, you may end up with these great tools, but to your point, how you use them or how you play them is critical whether or not you're going to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, how you use your equipment is, in my opinion, more important than the equipment itself.
I'm afraid when we'll be working on our campaign, it will be on the boring side in this kind of
probably. Yeah.
But authenticity.
Authentically boring.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But hey, look, if you're gonna tout that it's a simulator, well, cool, giddy up, let's simulate, and we're gonna simulate you flying for 4 hours and doing nothing. but that's why I like multiplayer, because I can't. It's fun. I have a lot of time on my hands right now, and it's like, oh, I want to go fly DCS, but I'm like, you know what? None of the people I normally fly with are around, and I just don't want to fly a single ship. That's boring to me, because I do want to simulate combat, and to me, combat, a vast majority of combat is talking on the radio. It's communicating and coordinating and lining things up. And when I can do that, like hell, out last night I was on stream, my A10 got all shot up. I couldn't even shoot anything, but I had fun because I was just circling the targets and talking other guys onto the targets. I enjoy that. So I think for me, that's one of the things that you're right, it's tactics, but it's also just coordination, because sometimes the tactics, obviously, nobody just learns them in a day. It takes time to refine that. Then it takes time to know what tactic works best in what scenario, and when should you change it. You got to know the rules to break them. What was that old saying about the Russians would say about the U.S., that they could never figure out what the U.S. was going to do because they never read their own manuals. Because our manuals say one thing, but then we would just do something completely out of that, which is fairly true. But it takes time to develop that stuff, and again, with multiplayer and playing with the same people over and over again, you really get like a groove going on. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think there's just the other point is you do have to learn how to use the tools, but at the end of the day, and that's one thing that I think when some of the feedback, I think, Baltic, that you had mentioned from Raven 1 was that people will get frustrated because they haven't invested the time to learn the tools. And you can spend hours and hours, but if, flying around, but if you've never flipped on that, the AT FLIR pod, that's just a different game.
Yeah. But that's the other side of the coin. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Those people who will really use a tool like a campaign like that to really learn the module, and they're happy they did. They'll spend more time, fly a mission a few times, and then get it right. That's also a good thing for them. So I think, it's the other side.
That's the right way to call it. It's an investment, because it really is hard to learn this stuff and to use it effectively. And that's where DCS is sort of a two-edged sword. Like, it's awesome that I have an F-14, an F-18, an F-16, an A-10, all these things that I can jump in and fly. but in real life, like unless you're an experimental test pilot or something, like you don't have that sort of option. And so you love the one you're with and you learn how to use that one, right? And so you spend hundreds of hours, like I didn't make pilot in command of an Apache. I mean, I had maybe 100 hours to my name. And really the only reason that they made me a pilot in command is because I had already been one with Kaioa. It had nothing to do with me flying the aircraft. It had me like judgment, it was like, okay, you know how to make good decisions, if things aren't right to land, you know how to make these big boy calls. But it had nothing to do with me being able to use the system, because I would fly with junior guys and be like, look, I'm the pilot in command. I don't know half of this stuff. So you teach me Apache stuff and I can teach you, airspace stuff, or whatever we're doing. But it takes a really long time to really understand those systems. And DCS is kind of the same way. I mean, you can functionally understand, okay, if I push this button, it broadcasts my speed, or something like that. But when do you use that? What is the right time to do these things? And that takes a long time to make that sort of muscle memory. But by then you're bored of flying the A-10, so now you want to fly the F-18. And then you dump all your A-10 knowledge, and now you're trying to remember how to land on a carrier. So DCS is its own worst enemy when it comes to learning the modules, unless you're just super dedicated or you have oodles of time, which I don't.
None of us has.
Some of these guys seem to have a ton of time, because I don't understand it. Like they can know the gnat's ass about every module. Oh, it's crazy.
I don't know. Kids, I have priorities, but at the end of the day, there are folks out there that are flying many, many hours. They learn the details, and like I said, I mean, I think that part of what is certainly working. Part of the discussion I've had with Jello lately has been around. We've talked about what is authenticity in terms of the content and making sure that we're providing great content to folks. But it's the same way, whether it's going to be DCS or whether podcast or other piece. So people are tuning in because it's authentic people talking about real things. Yeah.
100%.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. It's been great fun. That's what I needed. I'm after 1 week of holidays in France with family, so I just got off the train and got here to record this. Get into the DCS mood again. So thank you.
Perfect timing.
It's great, and it even though you said it's going to be short, it's an hour and 3 minutes. So all good.
So, very good. And so next time on we'll have Ward Much Carroll with us. So we'll be recording that in probably 2 weeks, proverbial. And looking forward to Apache being out. Probably after some time flying, we should meet again and ask some of the questions people might have about it after they fly.
We're gonna have to do like a stream or something, like an Air Combat Sim podcast stream and fly.
It's a fantastic idea.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Do it.
Perfect. All right, guys. So it's good fun. Thank you very much. See you around. See you next time.
See you guys.
See you.
Thanks for listening to Air Combat Sim. Don't forget to subscribe or tell a friend about it. You have a question, idea for an episode, or a special guest you'd like us to invite? Feel free to reach out on Facebook, Discord, or via email. Air Combat Sim was brought to you by BVR Productions.